Hey guys, let's get more news about Steelers, but first, don't forget to subscribe and leave your like. 5 Steelers offensive veterans who need strong training camp to secure roster spot. The Pittsburgh Steelers will open training camp before you know it, the first opportunity for most to watch their team. They have a lot of rookies drawing excitement this year, and young players on the verge of breaking out. But championship rosters require all sorts of players, and you never know quite where. In that spirit, I offer a list of 5 offensive veterans who need a strong camp to retain their roster spots. These are guys who have already been on the roster but find themselves on the fringes, for whatever reason. Some may be closer to securing a job than others, but none of them can afford to slip. Like some of the other players in this list, I think we can say Calvin Austin III is inside the roster bubble. Other wide receivers are calling him the leader of the room, but ultimately, he still has to produce. Right now, his best asset is that he is the starting punt returner, but they can find someone else to do that. So far, the Steelers haven't gotten much out of him, and if he doesn't impress, that only makes it more likely they trade for somebody. Rodney Williams. It's hard to say whether Williams is inside or outside the roster bubble, but I'll lean outside. While he is a special teams player first, he did contribute offensively for the Steelers last year. He is a guy who has great hustle and has some ability, despite his lack of pedigree. The new kickoff rules could only serve to make him more valuable, and MyCole Pruitt less so. Dan Moore Jr. These next few are interesting cases because they interlink and call back to last season. Dylan Cook and Spencer Anderson made Kevin Dotson and Kendrick Green expendable a year ago. Cook and Troy Fautanu, and potentially Anderson, can help make Moore expendable as well. The Steelers won't cut him if he loses his starting job, but a trade offer could sway them if they are comfortable with their other options. Nate Herbig. Nate Herbig is another veteran who is potentially vulnerable, mostly because he is making $4 million. That's a lot to pay for a backup, and nobody expects him to hold off Zach Frazier at center. But it's Mason McCormick who could ultimately displace him as the Steelers' top interior reserve. They also moved Anderson to guard. If the young guys step up, Herbig is a potential trade or cut candidate. Dylan Cook. Cook made the 53-man roster last year as the 9th lineman. He had an impressive training camp, but he will need to have another to keep his job. Given the other maneuvers this offseason, I expect them to leave him at tackle and let him mature there. If he can show that he can be the swing tackle, he can knock more off the roster. Trending, the Pittsburgh Steelers hope their former 4th-round pick breaks out in year 3. The Pittsburgh Steelers overhauled their receiving core by parting ways with 2 of their top 3 wide receivers this offseason. The Steelers traded Deontay Johnson to the Carolina Panthers and released Allen Robinson II. They addressed the position in free agency and the draft by signing Quez Watkins, Scott Miller, and Van Jefferson and drafting Roman Wilson. The Steelers hope their former 4th-round pick can break out. Calvin Austin III enters his 3rd year in the NFL and hasn't played much in his first 2 seasons due to injuries and wasn't a part of their starting rotation. The Steelers hope he breaks out. So far, he has impressed their new position coach. He's been outstanding. That's a guy who's gone from here to here in just 8 weeks, as Annie said, raising his left hand well above the right to illustrate how far Austin has come. I mean, it's been really fun to watch. He's a worker, he's intentful, he's urgent, he wants to be coached, and you can see it because his game has done that. Austin will compete for a starting spot. Austin will likely compete against Roman Wilson for the starting slot job. Wilson has familiarity playing in the slot and on the outside. Many believe he will eventually become the Steelers' WR2, but it might take time for him to develop. Steelers could trade this polarizing offensive lineman before Week 1. The Steelers' roster has seen improvements across the board, but as the regular season approaches, one name frequently mentioned as a potential trade candidate is Dan Moore. Last year, we saw Kendrick Green traded to the Texans and Kevin Dotson to the Rams. It remains to be seen if the Steelers will continue this trend of trading players with expiring rookie contracts to maximize their value before they likely enter free agency. Pittsburgh drafted Troy Fautanu in the first round this year, potentially replacing Dan Moore as a starter. We will see how Fautanu performs in training camp to determine if he will be the Week 1 starter. If Fautanu excels and quality tackles are released before rosters are trimmed to 53 players, the Steelers might explore the trade market for Moore, who has 49 career starts. Since Moore is likely to leave in free agency after the season, a trade could provide him with a fresh start and give Pittsburgh additional draft capital. However, this scenario hinges on the availability of a tackle with similar experience being released, which would make trading Moore a viable option. The Steelers have a well-known tendency to ease their rookies into the lineup rather than starting them immediately. Last season, we saw this approach with Broderick Jones, Keanu Benton, and Joey Porter Jr., all of whom took a while to secure their starting roles. Troy Fautanu undoubtedly has the potential to be a Day 1 starter, given his impressive skill set and talent. However, considering the Steelers' preference for gradually acclimating their new players, Fautanu will need to have an exceptional training camp to break this tradition and earn significant playing time right from the start. His ability to adapt quickly to the NFL and showcase his readiness will be crucial in determining how soon he can make an impact on the field. If Troy Fautanu adapts well to the NFL learning curve, that would be an ideal outcome for the Steelers. However, in my opinion, trading Moore would be unwise. Although Moore has been inconsistent as a starter, he would make an excellent backup tackle when Fautanu eventually takes over the starting role. Right tackle insurance with substantial starting experience is rare and valuable, and keeping Moore around to finish his rookie contract would be a smart move. Moreover, having a reliable backup like Moore is crucial in case of injuries, which are common in the NFL. His familiarity with the team system and his ability to step in as needed provide the Steelers with a safety net that shouldn't be underestimated. While the Steelers don't have many players they can afford to trade, Dan Moore would, unfortunately, be the most realistic candidate if a trade were necessary. However, maintaining depth and experience on the offensive line is paramount for the team's success, making it more beneficial to keep Moore on the roster. And you, fan? What do you think of the situation of Dan Moore Jr.? Leave your opinion in the comments.